The life and sad ending of Etta James. Etta James was born Jemissetta Hawkins in Los Angeles, California, on January 25, 1938. Her mother was just 14 years old at the time. She never knew her father, though she would later say she had reason to believe he was the well-known pool hustler Minnesota Fats. James was raised by friends and relatives instead of her mother through most of her childhood, and it was while she was living with her grandparents that she began regularly attending a Baptist church. James's voice made her a natural for the choir, and despite her young age, she became a soloist with the group and appeared with them on local radio broadcasts. At the age of 12, after the death of her foster mother, James found herself living with her mother in San Francisco, and with little adult supervision, she began to slide into juvenile delinquency. But James's love of music was also growing stronger, and with a pair of friends, she formed a singing group called the Creolettes. The girls attracted the attention of famed bandleader Johnny Otis, and when he heard their song, "Rock With Me, Henry," a racy answered song to Hawk Ballard's infamous "Work With Me, Annie," he arranged for them to sign with Modern Records, and the Creolettes cut the tune under the name The Peaches, the new handle coming from Etta's longtime nickname. Roll With Me, Henry, renamed The Wallflower, became a hit in 1955, though Georgia Gibbs would score a bigger success with her cover version, much to Etta's dismay. After charting with a second R&B hit, Good Rickin' Daddy, the Peaches broke up and James stepped out on her own. James's solo career was a slow starter, and she spent several years cutting low-selling singles for Modern and touring small clubs until 1960, when Leonard Chess signed her to a new record deal. James would record for Chess Records and its subsidiary labels Argo and Checker into the late 70s, and working with producers Ralph Bass and Harvey Fuqua, she embraced a style that fused the passion of R&B with the polish of jazz and scored a number of hits for the label, including All I Could Do Was Cry, My Dearest Darling, and Trust in Me. While James was enjoying a career resurgence, her personal life was not faring as well. She began experimenting with drugs as a teenager, and by the time she was 21, she was a heroin addict. And as the 60s wore on, she found it increasingly difficult to balance her habit with her career, especially as she clashed with her producers at Chess, fought to be paid for her royalties, and dealt with a number of abusive romantic relationships. James's career went into a slump in the mid-60s, but in 1967 she began recording with producer Rick Hall at Fame Studios in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and adopting a tougher, grittier style. She bounced back onto the R&B charts with tunes Tell Mama and I'd Rather Go Blind. In the early 1970s, James had fallen off the charts again. Her addiction was raging, and she turned to petty crime to support her habit. She entered rehab on court order in 1973, the same year she recorded the rock-oriented album Only a Fool with Gabriel Meckler. Through most of the 70s, a sober James got by touring small clubs and playing occasional blues festivals, and she recorded for Chess with limited success despite the high quality of her work. In 1978, longtime fans of the Rolling Stones paid homage to James by inviting her to open some shows for them on tour, and she signed with Warner Bros., cutting the album Deep in the Night with producer Jerry Wexler. While the album didn't sell well, it received enthusiastic reviews and reminded serious blues and R&B fans that James was still a force to be reckoned with. James fell back into drug addiction after becoming involved with the man with the habit, and she went back to playing club dates when and where she could until she kicked again thanks to the stay at the Betty Ford Center in 1988. That same year, James signed with Island Records and cut a powerful comeback record, 7 Year Itch, produced by Barry Beckett of the Muscle Shoals Rhythm Section. The album sold respectably, and James was determined to keep her career on track, playing frequent live shows and recording regularly, issuing Stickin' to My Guns in 1990 and The Right Time in 1992. In 1994, a year after she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, James signed to the Private Music label and recorded Mystery Lady, Songs of Billie Holiday, a tribute to the great vocalist that she had long cited as a key influence. The album earned James her first Grammy Award. The relationship with Private Music proved simpatico, and between 1995 and 2003, James cut 8 albums for the label while also maintaining a busy touring schedule. In 2003, James published an autobiography, Rage to Survive, The Etta James Story, and in 2008, she was played on screen by modern R&B diva Beyonce Knowles in Cadillac Records, a film loosely based on the history of Chess Records. In personal life, James was married to Artis Mills from 1969 until her death. James had 2 sons, Donto James and Sametto James, born to different fathers. In 2010, James was hospitalized with MRSA-related infections, and it was revealed that she had received treatment for dependence on painkillers and was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. James released The Dreamer for Verve Forecast in 2011. She claimed it was her final album of new material. James was diagnosed with terminal leukemia later that year, and sadly, she died on January 20th, 2012, in Riverside, California. She was 73 years old. She was buried in Inglewood Park Cemetery, Inglewood, Los Angeles County, California.